It's so nice to see everyone. Everyone, welcome. If there's any other friends who want to come join up front, we have some more. We have a few seats, so it looks like we made a guess at the number of chairs pretty accurately here. We had 90 chairs, so I think we're just at capacity, which is so wonderful to see everyone here in person. And of course to see our dear Dale flashing before our eyes. I want to first just say it's so great to have everybody here, to gather everybody. I feel like this is a room truly filled with the history of photography, the history of curating, of collecting, of the market. So many people have done so many things to further this field. So a big thank you. And it's so nice to welcome you here at Christie's, where of course Dale founded our department in November of 1978. So it's been 45 years. And there are, this is the Wolf of Wall Street era. There's so much flashing on the screen here. This is gonna just keep looping throughout tonight. So many of you are seeing these now just for the first time, which is pretty wonderful. I want to really acknowledge the family who has come as well tonight. So Dale's older brother Dexter is here, his family, his niece Sarah and her husband Doug, and then lots of other family members from Dale's sister and that side of the family. They've traveled from far and wide, so it's a real honor to have you here. And you will come to see how much Dale was loved in this community. So I want to acknowledge also just how much Dale was admired for being a scholar and an encyclopedist around the history of photography. He knew photographic objects from daguerreotypes forward, and every one of us here learned from Dale at some point during these last years. So what's going to happen for the agenda tonight is this is the simple introduction, and then I'm going to invite up Lisa, who's going to speak and share a little bit about the early days here at Christie's, and then Sarah will come up and talk on behalf of the family, and then I'm going to call up a handful of people who have prepared some remembrances. We have until about 7:15. We won't go forever, and there's lots of conversations that I know people want to have, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So again, thanks for being here. Lisa.
Wow, can I just say hello to everybody before I go? No, one by one. It's so cool to see you all. This is ridiculous. Let's spend the night. Okay. Many of you know that I worked with Dale for about 2.5 years in the first years of Christie's East. And Dale and I worked all the time. A lot of times I would be looking for Dale because he wasn't in our office, and I could find him when he was actually knew when there was going to be a really good furniture sale, and he was napping on it in the warehouse. I'm like, come on. But I couldn't have had a more glorious friend and mentor from whom I learned a ridiculous amount. He's a genius, as you all know. So I miss him already. I'm sure we all do here. And I need to go stand over there. Okay, no, just kidding. Oh, there it is. You're not supposed to laugh at that. Anyway, I'd also like to make just a quick few remarks about my colleague when I was at Christie's, who is working in London, South Ken, and that's David Allison. Do a lot of you know David? Yeah. So I'm going to read his some notes that he sent, and it's kind of about meeting Dale W. Stulz for the first time by David Allison. I began at Christie's South Kensington in London in 1977, when the legendary Bill Brooks, managing director, took a punt on me Does somebody know this? Can you hear? Can you hear me? Yes, you're good? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I heard something. 2 years ago, I was asked to take over the cataloging of the sales of 19th century photographs, for which I was woefully underqualified, says David. Within hours of my appointment, however, I received a transatlantic words of encouragement from the great Dale Stulz of Christie's East, who remained an invaluable mentor during my early years. I eventually met Dale in person at Harry Lund's gallery in Washington, D.C. in early February 1982. It was his first trip to the States, and Dale and I went over to lay out the memorable day, and so it was. A limo on hand with whistle-stop tour of the DC sites, then to Harry Lund's clients, a grand dinner from magnificent views of the cities, and then off to the airport, where I learned his disposition of traveling only in checker cabs. The next morning, whilst Dale watched the ice flowing down the Hudson River, contemplating the difference between the U.S. and seemingly sleepy UK collectors' photography scene. Suddenly, Dale was awake, and Dale, as you'll know, loved this, given the expense account of the past 24 hours. He was straight and up. When he did that, it was amazing. Straight and up, pulling on the phone, pulling in more business and more company for possible pledges to the auction materials that they were going to give. Then they'd set off, speed over for cocktails at Delmonico's. The 1970s, and 1980s were heady days in the photography collecting world, and Dale was reminded thereafter, the principal linchpin, respected in both the collectible marketplace and curatorial and academic fields. My partner, Terry Binns, we're so lucky to be invited to Dale's inner circle, and today find major consolation. This is how I feel too, knowing who loved him and cared for him deeply. Thank you to Christie's for honoring Dale's memory. Like me, he was immensely proud to be working for this great company and was uber loyal. And finally, thank you to Dale W. Stulz for your peerless auctioneering ability, your razor-sharp intelligence, your wit, your generosity of spirit, your warmth, your humility, and your downright fun.
Hi, I'm Dale's niece, Sarah. On behalf of my cousins, Kim and Chris, and my dad, Dexter, we are so incredibly pleased and touched to have been included in this. It means the world for us to be here with you all to celebrate Dale's life. So, when I think about my Uncle Dale, the first thing that comes to mind are the mischievous twinkle in his eye and the bemused smile he often wore. That man was constantly up to something. He was generous and kind. When my husband and I were in Los Angeles to pack up his things, I came across countless copies of letters he'd sent praising anyone from CEOs to flight attendants to sales clerks. He was such a busy man, and he took time out of his busy schedule to do that. There were letters going back to the 70s. They were written on typewriters. They were printed on dot matrix printers, emails. It was amazing. It was overwhelming. When I think of Dale, it's not just one memory that stands out. It's a series of vignettes, typically set in the evening, and always involving a cocktail, or maybe 4. I didn't get the opportunity to spend a lot of time with him when I was a child. Most of my memories with Dale start in my late teens. My first vivid recollection is from one time we both stayed with my grandmother. That night, he taught me how to press perfect pleats and how to pack a perfect suitcase. After Nanny, our grandmother, went to bed, he and I stayed up incredibly late, talking about everything from Edward Steichen, who I had just discovered and fallen in love with his work, to Dale's recent travels, to my grand plans for the future. Looking back now, I have to laugh when I recall how he humored my delusions of grandeur that evening, although he may have been partially to blame as he kept topping off my soda with whatever god-awful liquor he was drinking that night. Talking to my dad, I'm pretty sure it was Imperial blended whiskey. That's what my grandmother liked. Whatever it was terrible. But I was a teenager, so it was supposed to be terrible. But if my Uncle Dale liked it, surely I needed to develop a taste for it. Thank God I never did. In my 20s, we started drinking martinis together, and I'm sure that surprises absolutely no one in this room. We drank them every time we saw one another, and at family gatherings, more often than not, it was the 2 of us left standing after everyone else had gone to bed. We usually found ourselves huddled together on a deck, in some bar, or in a hotel room sipping on something. He'd tell me about his most recent Paris trip, and we'd talk about our plans for the future. My uncle was an amazing cheerleader. He could make you feel like you could do anything if you just put your mind to it. Between visits, there were the marathon phone conversations, and we can all in the family attest to these conversations. They lasted at least an hour, sometimes 2 or 3, and sometimes even 4. We never ran out of things to talk about during those conversations. I miss those conversations so much. So much. I know you do too. And you. Oh, geez. In my 30s, when I was diagnosed with cancer, Dale surprised me with a visit. I had just come out of surgery and was out of my mind on painkillers, just completely loopy. One of the only things I remember clearly about my hospital stay was Dale showing up. My parents and husband, Doug, who was still just the boyfriend at that time, came into the room, and then Dale stuck his head around the corner with that twinkle in his eye and bemused smile on his face. I was so incredibly happy to see him that day, and it was such a Dale thing to do, drop everything, fly across the country, and spend a few days. It sounds strange, but I will always look back on that time in my life with a smile. Not only did Dale drop everything and fly across the country to be with me, but it was during that trip that he and Doug, my husband, got to know one another. They bonded over their shared love of fine footwear, watches, dogs, and maybe me a little, but we all know it was mostly the footwear, watches, and dogs. After that trip, Dale refused to call Doug Doug, instead preferring his first name, which is Harvey. And Dale could never just say Harvey. No, he had to add a ridiculous amount of pomp and circumstance and say it with a heavy British accent. And then he would just chuckle like it was the funniest thing he'd ever said. It just amused him to no end. So I will leave you with this. Before my grandfather passed away, he once said that after he was gone, he would come back as a yellow butterfly to check on his loved ones. For decades, anytime I see a yellow butterfly, I'd smile and think of my grandmother, and then my Aunt Kathy after we lost her, and then my grandmother when we lost her. Keeping that in mind, when Doug and I were in LA after Dale's death, we spent most of our time at Dale's house packing things up. A lot of that time was dedicated to the garage. Lots of times, our efforts spilled out into the driveway. There was this yellow butterfly. I'm gonna cry. There was this yellow butterfly that would just show up almost every day. He always seemed to arrive when I was getting stressed out or sad, and he'd just fly around while we worked. Then, when I least expected it, that damn butterfly would make a beeline for my face and fly circles around my head until my sadness was replaced with annoyance or laughter, depending on the day. Then he'd dart off into the distance as if his job was done. Believe what you will about the afterlife and reincarnation, but you will never convince me that annoying little butterfly was anyone but Dale coming to make me laugh when I'd been about to cry. So, if your face ever gets dive-bombed by a yellow butterfly, fear not, it's most likely Dale swooping in to check on you.
My name's Peter McGill, and I looked in the mirror this morning and realized I'm no longer an intern. And what happened is I realized, too, Fern will recount this, I was Light Gallery's first intern. And one of my first jobs was to frame Andre Kertész's newest work for an exhibition we were having. And I was in the middle of taking 2 hours to do a 20-minute framing job, and this gentleman walked in the gallery. He had a Burberry raincoat on, and he said, "What you doing?" And I said, "I'm framing Andre Kertész's new work for a show that opens next week." He said, "I am Kertész." That was the world that Dale and I were born into. So, being no longer an intern, it's hard to see stuff at a certain distance. The big problem with this gathering here today, and thank you, Darius, for bringing everybody together, and regardless of what anybody says, photography is not dead. And I think we should all embrace each other and keep the spirit moving. So the big problem with this gathering today is that our dear Dale is not here with us. However, he may well be, as I have done my research and have it on both Hans's and Maggie's authority, that Dale did indeed, while under Christie's employ, spend more than several evenings and mornings in the house catching up on his sleep underneath various presentation tables. Hans went on to even further share the fact that one morning Dale woke to find that he had overslept and there were people in the room actually viewing art. Undaunted, Dale promptly stood up, grabbed one of the cloths off the table, wrapped it around himself, and marched to the bathroom. We miss him. I'm sure there are a few facts that some of you may or may not know about Dale. He graduated from Princeton summa cum laude in 1973. Now, Princeton's tough. Graduating from college in the 70s was tough. Cum laude was tough, but come on, summa cum laude. Congratulations. Dale was a polygamist and had 3 wives: Libby McCoy, Mary Virginia Swanson, and Lisa Kremens. Dale loved dogs, and I remember speaking to him at length about the separation anxiety he felt when he left his beloved Mike behind on various business trips. When appraising the Pier 24 collection in the summer of 2021, Dale befriended Allie Houseline's painfully aloof and intolerant dog, Penny. These are Allie, the dog owner's words. To form an unlikely and hilarious odd couple, Allie's words. Dale had perfect table manners. His only fault was he ate too damn slowly. Dale was proper during business hours. He loved the TWA hotel at JFK. The stuffy disclosures which followed his emails were in several languages. Dale could certainly mix the right kind of martini, and he loved, like Ansel Adams, writing limericks, sometimes ribald. Dale was extraordinarily generous as long as he liked you. And our home is littered with wonderful and meaningful gifts that Dale sent Susan and me to commemorate some occasion or just commemorate the fact that we were friends. The last gift Dale sent was, appropriately, 4 cocktail glasses, each of which had a relief on the bottom which echoed the profile of a mountain range. He asked us to keep 2 for ourselves and to send 2 on to our friend Richard Leroy, the photographer who had made more than several magnificent pictures in Yosemite that Dale had fallen in love with and which had consequently inspired the gift. Now that Dale, as Ansel used to say, passed on to the last hypobath in the sky, and I've removed myself from the business, I can share the fact that we were absolutely shocked to discover that we were the 2 people the Internal Revenue Service called to double-check appraisals. Talk about a conflict. Dale Dale and I had a wonderful history together, beginning in the 70s, though neither one of us could ever remember precisely when it began, and neither one of us really wanted to pin down specifically just why it was we couldn't remember. We, of course, steered client appraisals to Dale over the years, but far more important was how Dale still stood with us as we were working on major transactions. He offered us a steady stream of advice, a steady stream of numbers, and so that we could hold the hands of our prospective institutional purchasers and let them know that, along with our assessment, what they were buying actually did have value. Dale did this out of his love for the field and out of friendship. He would never accept compensation for this partnership, a fact which showed the true mettle of his character. As we know, Dale was quick and extraordinarily funny. Ann Tucker shared with me that she was at a Houston Photo Fest fundraising auction with Clint Willauer, years ago. Ann and Clint were sitting near the back of the room, and Ann said to Clint, "Be careful with Dale. Don't talk to me while you're bidding. He can read your lips." Clint said to Ann, "We're sitting too far back. He cannot." And Dale promptly shot from the podium, "Oh, yes, I can." Knowing that my friend Rick Wester had worked at Christie's a while back, I called him and asked him to please share any good stories he had concerning Dale and that I could share with you. Rick simply said, "You know, Peter, Dale didn't really like me." Maggie stated it most clearly. If Dale liked you, you were in. He was the most wonderful friend on earth. If he didn't like you, oh well. Peter Galassi reported that during the middle of an auction in the earliest days of Christie's East, there was confusion concerning who got the last bid in a battle between G. Ray Hawkins of Los Angeles and some other unsuspecting bidder in the room. To resolve the conflict, Dale simply exclaimed from the podium, "Oh, gee, Ray." I was thinking of sharing a Dale test, a kind of audience participation thing, but I thought much better of it. I'll ask and answer my own questions. How long was Dale writing appraisals? Over 45 years. How many appraisals did Dale write? Thousands. How many are over 600? No, Peter, you know this. Over 1,000 pages? Scores. What is the longest amount of time Dale took to complete a single appraisal? As a client, I can't answer that. And Dale could turn a phrase. In response to what we thought was a very simple request, asking Dale to submit a proposal to write an appraisal for a client who is giving their wife's collection to the Museum of Modern Art, Dale shared the following. Simple question, he wrote this in return. "Dear Peter, who I hope is either surviving wintry weather in Bedford or far preferably enjoying the warm, sunny climes of somewhere points south. How could I possibly resist providing a proposal of a collection of such superb quality for which I feel particularly well qualified for a number of reasons? Among them, A, my intimate friendship with Patroclus." I don't know if you should talk about that. "B, a particular knowledge of Camillus S. Fly's importance, still known in the history of photography. Intimate knowledge of an interesting backstory to the deaccessioning of the Steichen masterpiece, The Pond, your client so wisely acquired with your sage counsel and adroit bidding at Sotheby's. And remember, this is a simple request for a proposal. And D, my complete nonpartisanship in fully recommending the Meserve Kernhardt collection go to the Beinecke Library at Yale, of which your client is a distinguished alumnus, instead of Princeton, of which I'm a nearly extinguished alumnus, without any antipathy arising whatsoever during my extensive appraisal work of said collection that resulted in a document of some 10,000 pages. He still hasn't answered the question. I very much appreciate your thinking of my possible involvement in such an important undertaking by being asked to provide a proposal. We're getting there. I would be on a flight to New York today to discuss this with you in person, but it would likely take me until Wednesday to get there given the prevailing nasty weather conditions. Points south, where you are, however, are definitely preferably doable. Failing these destinations being viable, perhaps a phone call in about 2 hours is possible. Sending warmest regards, Dale. Dale was as good a friend as anybody could ever have. He was loyal, funny, and he certainly knew when to hold his cards and when to pass them. And I think we all miss it very much. Thank you.
It's nice to see you all. Can you hear me? Yeah. So my name is Denise Bethel, and I knew Dale for decades. As Dale was the funny and witty person we all knew, I'm sure everyone in this room has more than one favorite Dale Stulz anecdote. And I thought I would start with two of mine, in the belief that Dale would want us laughing now instead of crying. First of all, I don't know if any of you remember this, but I was always so impressed with Dale's advertisement in the APAD directory. It said, Dale W. Stulz, since 1951. And then along the bottom of the ad, it had that running list of cities that he appraised in, I guess, Los Angeles, New York, Paris, Toronto, just like the high retail brand that he was. And I was always jealous that he got to that since 1951 line first, because I too am since 1951. We were only 4 months apart. For those in the room who have tried their hand at auctioneering, you will probably remember that Dale was always helpful. He was always giving tips. And they were genuinely helpful because he had done so many auctions. Even after he left Christie's, I know there were charities that depended on his auctioneering. In 2000, I had just finished auctioning the morning session at Sotheby's when Dale walked up to me at the lunch break and said, again in an attempt to be helpful, I think you should stand up when you're in the podium. He said, I can't really see you too well up there. You should stand up. Now, for those of you who don't know this, an auctioneer's podium box, there is a platform for standing up, but behind you there's a bench where you can sit down. And I said, Dale, I am standing up. I've always been standing up all these years. I am standing up. Well, we both had a good laugh, but he didn't leave it there. During the lunch break, he went out to one of those health aid supply stores that are around the hospitals at Sotheby's, and he bought me a pair of pads for my shoes. He had the biggest smile on his face when he came back into the auction room before the afternoon session and proudly handed me the inserts for my shoes. But that didn't make much difference. When I joined Swan Galleries in 1980, Dale was already an experienced hand in photo auctions. He had already put together photo auctions for Martin Gordon, and then at the auction house he founded called Argus, and then at Christie's, which is where he was when I met him in 1980. But before the auction business, he had already worked at or run, photo galleries in San Francisco and New York. I got Dale on tape. I've got him on tape in Los Angeles in 1994. And it ended up being, we went on and on and on, it ended up being Dale Stulz Part 1, because I had no idea how much he had done before he got to Christie's. And unfortunately, as with many of the tapes that I did with actually some of you in this room, we always planned on Part 2, but we never got there. Dale and I always made a point to see each other when we were in New York together or when I went to LA. We had a lot to talk about, especially the value of photography and what the market was doing. We sometimes locked horns. We didn't always agree, but I think we both realized that the kind of conversations we could have with each other were special. They were certainly special to me, and I hope they were to him. Auction house people, at least in the old days, were pretty much one-stop, or at the most, two-person shops. And you had to know everything. A daguerreotype might walk in one day, 2 hours later, a picture of Robert Mapplethorpe would come in, and you had to be able to understand and evaluate all of it. If you look back at the early catalogs that Christie's had, that Dale had, also at Sotheby's, also at Swan, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lots in a single auction. And so, with the sad loss of our friend Dale, we are not only losing a funny, witty, charming, bow tie wearing compatriot, we are also losing everything that Dale saw. Think about it. A lot of it won't come up again. A lot of it won't make its way into museums. And he was carrying it around with him. With his passing, we are losing an encyclopedia. We're losing his eye, his judgment, and his connoisseurship with absolutely every aspect of the history of photography. When I look back on my time at Swan and then later at Sotheby's, I can say without hesitation that it was certainly the great adventure of my life, and I think Dale might have said the same. I think he loved what he was doing, which is why he kept doing it. We used to commiserate on the endless travel, the endless work, the 24/7 that was typical of his appraisal business and mine. I kept saying, Dale, when are you going to slow down? But he was present at the birth of a market, and he helped to create its legacy, and that was hard to walk away from. I've always believed that every person I've known is in some way irreplaceable, and that every person is unique. But I will remember Dale as something special. Now, I would have killed any of my staff at Sotheby's if they'd ever put in a catalog entry that somebody was really unique. Because you can't be really unique. You're either unique or you're not. But I think I'm just going to say it. Dale was really, really unique. Thank you.
Good evening. Dale called me Peter the Younger. He called my father, who was also named Peter, Peter the Elder. Dale worked with 4 generations of my family as an appraiser, advisor, and over the years, a close friend. What brought us together was the Meserve Kuhnhardt collection, the largest privately owned collection of 19th century American photography. My great-great-grandfather, Frederick Hill Meserve, was one of the country's earliest collectors. Meserve began collecting pictures to illustrate his father's Civil War diary and inspired my great-grandmother, Dorothy Meserve Kuhnhardt, to devote her life to the collection too. Eventually, my grandfather, then my father and uncle, took over. Then the 80,000 some odd photographs became my responsibility. From the time I was a boy, I remember Dale visiting our home to help catalog and conduct appraisals. He would show up always wearing a bow tie and spend days poring over albumen prints, daguerreotypes, tintypes, and carte de visites, which we spread out on couches, tables, and even the floor. Dale carefully inspected and took handwritten notes on each photograph, and he asked thousands of questions about the history of the collection. And after one visit, he wrote, quote, "At this point, I feel as though I've spent some time chatting with Frederick Hill Meserve, which has been thoughtfully delightful." I remember Dale for the fun he weaved into everything. He often lamented about growing older, writing, "Part of the insidious side of aging is forgetfulness. A thick fog sets in when I'm researching and thinking about things that have really interested me, but unfortunately I'm now in tax time hell where there is no fog." As you know, Dale had a twisted sense of humor. On the subject line of one email he wrote, "Speaking of brain farts." He then explained Cerebral flatulation is nothing of which to be ashamed. I have it frequently. It's all part of the aging process. Dale had his own unique way of describing the things that frustrated him about air travel. I got back safe and sound, he wrote after one winter visit, despite the usual delay and surliness in the United Airlines specialties. They suck fecal-filled icicles. Along with his professional inquiries, he'd mix in his own personal news. I have got to go back to the dentist for a bit more oral surgery in the morning, so I likely won't be able to vocally communicate comfortably until Thursday. I want my mommy, damn it. He loved the word damn it. He loved making up new words. He wrote, I tried a workcation starting a week ago. It doesn't work, damn it. He used his own shorthand, giving initials to his phrases. I'll file it with Special Secure Secret Place, the old SSSP. In another email explaining that he had missed a deadline, he wrote in the subject line, I'm officially a TUWUFU, which translates to totally, utterly, woefully, unmitigated, fucked up. At Christmas, he wrote, I hope this email finds you well and that you're safe and happy and manage to find some comfort and joy in the upcoming holiday season with nutmeg and cinnamon. Yes, nutmeg and cinnamon make me sneeze, and all the smell of freshly cut pine, which you know also makes me sneeze. He ended his letters always with your ever humble, mumbling appraiser, Dale. After more than 4 decades working together, the Meserve Kuhnhart collection was transferred to the Yale Beinecke Library. Dale wrote, I feel like I have given birth. Then he ended his letter just months before he died with what sounded like a goodbye. Please know I have felt it's a true privilege devoting a very special relationship to you and your family I've come to know and work with for so many decades. With the entirety of the collection now at the Beinecke, present and future generations will have a unique resource to discover, mine, and interpret the history with fresh eyes and new energies. On behalf of my many generations of my family, I want to say to my good friend, who I greatly miss, thank you, Dale, for guiding us.
Thank you, Darius. Thank you for hosting this. Hello, everybody. I'm Hans Kraus, and I met Dale in 1978. Oh, how about this? I met Dale in 1978 in San Francisco, where I had a summer job working at John Howell Books. Dale took me out for a drink. I realized that I couldn't keep up with him in that activity, but that we shared a passion for photographs. My first job out of college in 1980 was with Christie's, initially at the South Kensington branch in London with David Allison and Terry Binns, and then here at Christie's East under Dale. He taught me much about this field and its market, which was revving up at that time. He kept his own hours, day and night, whether in the office we shared or at the racing club across the street. In spite of this, Dale was never late for an auction and managed to entertain and coax bidders with his erudite charm. Dale made frequent visits, business trips, and on one of these he took me along to visit Harry Lunn in Washington. We accomplished a lot and were amply rewarded by our host with copious beverages. I tried to keep up. The more I learned about 19th and early 20th century photographs, the greater the temptation was to purchase for myself. Dale knew this, and when he left Christie's to run Light Gallery, he admitted he had not recommended me as his successor. I was crestfallen and confused. What would I do next? After some time, I realized that he had done me a huge favor, launching me on my own at an opportune moment, sooner than I would have otherwise, and propitious timing for the discovery and acquisition of prime 19th century photographs. A few years later, Dale had moved to California, and Maggie Weston invited Dale and me for dinner while we were in Paris. And I shared with him, at that time, my disappointment in not having been named as head of the department at age 25. He truly appreciated my clearing these cobwebs, and we became much closer as friends and even confidants after that. As everyone knows, Dale had strong opinions. When he came through New York, he regularly visited, and we would share a refreshment or a meal and lots of stories together. Dale had the ability to forge deep and lasting friendships, but if someone crossed him, they became a sniveling gutter snipe or some other such outcast. Dale performed appraisals for a number of my clients, during which we had fun batting values back and forth and discussing our justifications. One such appraisal in 1996 brought us together in Hamburg, Germany, in order for him to appraise Bockelberg's collection. We spent 2 days with Bockel and Anna enjoying, and you guessed it, fine wine and food while discussing the world of photography to which we each brought a different perspective. Dale was highly instrumental in building our field. I'm not alone in missing him, his expertise, wit, wisdom, and his capacity for friendship. Thank you.
It's crazy. Okay. In 1978, I gingerly entered the photography world by accepting a position at the Lund Gallery. I had absolutely no clue of the enchanted access and excess I was about to be exposed to. And at the age of 21, my world, which was somewhat naive, was about to be changed on every front. Many of you in the audience may have known Harry Lund and can probably imagine the extraordinary exposure I was afforded to art and artists, international travel and cuisine, and of course to eccentric and brilliant characters, and that's where my dear friend Dale comes in. I met Dale during my first year at Lund Gallery. He stepped into the gallery as if he was stepping out of The Great Gatsby. Peering over the top of his glasses, in his herringbone sports jacket and bow tie, he sized me up and probably was ready to quickly dismiss me as being inconsequential. But one of the most critical skills I had to master very early on while working for Harry was to make the perfect martini. So, needless to say, besides preserving my job at Lund Gallery, it was a skill that certainly enabled a friendship with Dale. Our paths would cross over the years at art fairs, gallery openings, at the racing club after a Christie's East sale, and the occasional boozy dinners that followed those events, which typically ended at extremely late hours. I don't recall how I made it home those evenings. I was never able to keep up with Dale's energy and his capacity. It seemed that he could keep going all night, and I believe he frequently did. Most of those nights remain a blur, but I do recall one exceptional night at the 930 Club in Washington, D.C. This was a small club where young bands often debut their first music. We were there after Harry Lund opened an exhibition of Beaumont Newhall's personal photography collection, part of which Beaumont had sold to Harry Lund. Well, despite all the alcohol and whatever else we were doing that night, I still have an indelible image of dancing with Dale, Beaumont, Harry, and Peter Bonnell. We were dancing to a young band called REM that hadn't yet released their first album. It was absolutely crazy night, and it was around the same time that Dale was offered the position to direct Light Gallery. And he did so on the condition that I join him as the assistant director. Our time working together at Light was stressful and therefore brief. And thereafter we went our separate ways. Dale moved to the West Coast and became the most respected photography appraiser in the industry. and I began my own gallery on Manhattan's Upper East Side. Dale's encyclopedic knowledge of all the works that passed through his hands while running the department here at Christie's, his access to the world's most important private and institutional collections, his extraordinary appetite to view and inspect every photograph that came up for auction, all of this created a mental library of photography that no one else will ever be able to achieve. And it wasn't just a quick flash photo of the individual objects. Dale had the uncanny ability to recall the most minute nuances for individual works, even years after viewing them. He was so devoted to detail, and he was devoted to his friends as they were to him. There was no one like Dale, and there never will be. I truly miss him.
Thank you, Darius. It's so nice to have another decades-long friend heading this department. I appreciate your hosting tonight. So I thought that I would share some things that perhaps you don't know about Dale. We all know that he loved dogs, but do you know that he dedicated funds to the care and feeding of the dogs down at 9/11 on the pile through the period of rescue? That's very typical Dale. The great gifts, of course, yes, the cocktails that we are allowing bourbon to swirl around Yosemite. If you don't have that set, you've got to get it. But one of my favorite things is that he often sent memorial stones to friends who had lost their beloved pets. So hopefully you'll see those in the yards. Certainly at my house you will when you come. He hated to fly, even though he said he loved all the first class effects. But his two favorite seatmates that he ever had, the first was Bonnie Raitt, and the second was Barry White. And he always talked about the two that he most hoped to sit next to at some point on a flight, Tina Turner, and his favorite diva of all time, Lady Gaga. He was gonzo for Lady Gaga. Dale was my first roommate in New York City when a group of us came east in 1984, 85. Lisa got here a hair earlier. But when there was changes at the Friends of Photography, Ansel had passed away and a lot of us came here. I had come to know Dale on his visits west to Carmel, of course Maggie and the Weston family, and others that would gather around Ansel and the workshops and all. So that's where that kind of began. What all of you may not realize is that after he set up shop in Los Angeles and Manhattan Beach first and then Hawthorne, that's when he became an appraiser. But what he did for so many nonprofit organizations, particularly in LA with LACE and LACPS, he was such a force to help those organizations early on in the field really survive, and often dragged his good friend Jeffrey Urema, an attorney, in to be the wise counsel for many of those nonprofits. But as we heard earlier about the auctions at HCP and many of the others, he was amazing, and I think all of those organizations benefited from his skill, of course, as being an appraiser, but he was also very cagey from the podium amongst his friends that he knew were in the audience. You were in big trouble if you were in an audience at an auction and he was going to call on you and help you to help them build up the prices, of course. You've heard tonight about Dale's My Three Wives, and we're scattered through the pictures, but I wanted to tell you that during the pandemic, Dale called Lisa and Libby and I and said he had something very important to talk about. And he had been thinking about taking a fourth wife. And he wanted to make sure that he got our approval. And in fact, it was Temple Smith Richardson. I know many of you know Temple is a longtime New Yorker and now lives in Livingston, Montana. But Temple was my second roommate in New York, along with Debbie Brown, who's here also. And we were thrilled. And there's a picture in the show of Temple looking like this because it was the big night online that he was going to ask. He wore his bow tie, and he had to hold up his Belgian slippers to show that he was fully dressed in the best possible garb for that very, very occasion. So I also just want to add at the end that he really loved his life on the West Coast. You know, we think of all of us as Dale being here, but he was in the West Coast for over 35 years and has dear friends in the curatorial community, among the artists and all. And his view of the West Coast may have begun in LA, but it definitely went up to Carmel to visit Maggie, to San Francisco to visit Claudia and Ursula, and on all the way up through Seattle to see Gail, and to Orcas Island, of course, where Maggie was for many years. So the West Coast is expansive, and I want to share that we are planning a West Coast event like this. My guess is it'll be a little more kickback. No offense, Jerry, it's just grand. But, you know, the arts community there is a blast and great friends. So we'll probably have like a barbecue at the beach afterwards or something. But we'll let you all know, and be sure to let us know.
I'll be there.
Yeah, good. I knew you would be. So we want to get all of your addresses. The last thing I want to share is that, as you may have noticed when you came in, there was a card regarding the Princeton University Art Museum. And many people had been asking us over the last months how to best make a contribution in some way to Indale's memory. And so, of course, we conferred with the family, we had ideas, and we decided on something that we then reached out to Kate Boussard and Mitra Abbaspour here tonight. And we really think that Dale would be very happy and hold a glass to what we've come up with. He had a long and close relationship with the Art Museum at his alma mater, Princeton University, and the fine art professionals who have built this outstanding collection to what it is today. We're proud to announce that Princeton has established a fund in Dale's honor. Its purpose is to supplement the collection by acquiring photographic works by artists Dale was close to personally and professionally, and to help ensure the photography's pride of place in the museum's future exhibitions, programs, and teaching. So we couldn't be happier. We hope that you'll all consider that. Kate and Mitra, I know you're here. And I hope that all of you that are interested in knowing more will reach out to both of them later this evening. So that's all I have to share. Thank you so much.
I'm going to invite Matthew Weston up in just a minute, but I want to also share. There's so many people who could not come, who wanted to come. And people like Keith Davis sent through a wonderful couple of paragraphs, which I'm going to read from briefly. Christoph Lunn, Beth Gates Warren, and I have one more here from Yves Schillo out at LACMA. And so if you'll give me just a minute here, and we're getting close to wrapping up. This is from Keith. The photography field is notable for including so many good and fascinating figures. Dale was one of the very best of these. Sounds a little bit like really unique. Dale loved pictures and he loved people. He could look at and talk about pictures all day long. In his vast experience as an auctioneer, appraiser, and private consultant, he saw many thousands of prints, too many thousands to actually count. These spanned the full spectrum, from daguerreotypes to inkjet prints and everything in between. He knew photo history intimately from handling and looking closely at all these works. He also loved the people. He was intrigued by the disparate personality types that met on the common ground of photography, the psychology of this interest, why people collect, where their enthusiasms come from, what they value, was always prominent in his mind. He was both a great conversationalist and a thorough professional. He was a close student of human nature, attentive to examples of both originality and foresight, as well as of foibles and foolishness. He seemed to know everyone in the field, the profession's various factions and allegiances, and where the bodies were buried. He was endlessly entertaining, and I never knew him to betray a professional trust. I brought Dale to Kansas City about 2004 when we needed a full appraisal of the Hallmark photographic collection. He was in town for a couple of weeks, and my wife and I greatly enjoyed getting to know him over cocktails and dinners. We remained in touch and enjoyed visiting together at auctions, trade fairs, and conferences. I was always pleased and amused by Dale's professional ads in the APAD directory. And just to say, that was noted by many people. And Keith mentions that these concluded with his name and the tagline, "Since 1951." I'm not going to read all of these, but just to share again with the family how much he was loved, and curators and collectors and professionals all around really sent their loving greetings. Matthew, would you like to, I don't know where you are, but if you would like to come and share. He's going to share a poem, and I'll let you explain what the significance of this is.
Sure. Thanks, Darius. So my name is Matthew Weston, and try to keep it together here. Dale was a mentor and a dear friend, and the last time I spoke to him, I really didn't think it was going to be the last time, and so I miss him and I'm pissed off at him. And the last time that I did see him in person, I made him a terrible martini. I blew it. I literally, the thumb came off the dropper, and I'm like, let me just throw it out. It's just a little vodka. He wouldn't do it. He absolutely, and he went through that thing. It was terrible. It was super sweet. And any of you who ever made a martini or had a martini with Dale, he loved them really dry. Blew it. Anyway, so Dale, I'm sorry. I truly am. So this poem, Dale actually read this at my stepfather's celebration, and my mom Maggie and Dale jousted with each other at who would read this poem and who got to do it first. Sadly, my mom couldn't make it. She's recent knee surgery and wasn't able to make the trip. So you got me. So here I am. I'll see if I can keep it together. It's a poem by Henry Scott Holland. Ooh-wee. I don't even think I can hold the piece of paper. Death is nothing at all. I have only slipped into the next room. I am I, and you are you. Whatever we were to each other, that we are still. Call me by my old familiar name. Speak to me in the easy way which you always used. Put no difference in your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed at the jokes we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without effect, without the trace of a shadow on it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is unbroken continuity. Why should I be out of mind because I am out of sight? I am waiting for you, for an interval, somewhere very near, just around the corner. All is well.
This is Dexter, Dale's brother.
His older brother.
Older brother.
Which makes me the one person who's known him longer than the rest of you. I'm blown away. We've heard such wonderful things. I could tell you stories about the other side, but in jest, they would have to be in jest. Speaking from my family, those that Sarah shared with you, I just want to say how pleased and excited and honored we are to be a part of this event. Sarah mentioned Dale's other niece, Kim, and Kim's here with her husband, Walt, and she mentioned Chris, who's here with his daughter, Lily, and we're so happy to have them. We're missing one person. My wife, Betsy. She couldn't make the trip due to ongoing medical issues, but she wanted me to convey two things. Number one, she's heartbroken at his death and not being able to share this event. And two, she loved him very much. Dale and I were not close as young people. We lived in two separate worlds. I won't go into the details. We just happened to be on two different paths. We started to get closer and closer as we lost first our father, then Kim and Chris's mom, who was the sweetest, most wonderful woman in the world, and then our mother. And we did get quite a bit closer. We never spent extended periods of time together. Dale's life was Southern California and New York and European destinations. My life was Central Virginia on the eastern slope of the Blue Ridge Mountains, North Carolina, and now Marietta, Georgia, just north of Atlanta. So our time together was limited, but we spent some very special times over the last 23 years. When I heard about him passing, I was shocked and very sad. I don't process things like this very easily. But this helps. It certainly does. I can't believe all the good things I've heard about him and from such valued people in this field. He surely had friends and colleagues, true friends and true colleagues. And I'm very proud of him, having heard so many of these nice things about my brother. So, I just want to say with heartfelt thanks to Dale's friends and colleagues who came to pay tribute to him, and to those whose time and effort went into planning this occasion. As you can see, I'm totally blown away. I want to thank them specifically, Darius for his support, Swan for her involvement, making us familiar, Sarah and me and Kim and Chris and Doug, understand Dale's working relationships, Lisa and Libby, and especially Paris for the fine job he did with this program. I walked in this room this afternoon. It brought tears to my eyes. But then I saw Dale doing this. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, those of you that I just mentioned, for all your help and preparations. This has been a fabulous, fabulous event. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you. Dexter, we can hear accents of Dale in your voice. So thank you. Everyone, thank you so much. That's the end of our planned agenda. I really want to acknowledge the spirit of community tonight. And it really, there's those of us that continue to work not only in the auction field, but just here in photography. There are so many, we stand upon the shoulders of so many of you that have done the work, built the community, sort of tilled the soil, planted the seeds. There really is a thriving community. It is no longer the same community of decades ago, but it has evolved and it has diversified, and there's a lot of great energy within this field. And so just to say thank you to all of you who were of Dale's generation and also who loved him and have shared your knowledge over the years. So I want to thank my team here, Rebecca, Jocelyn, Annika, who's manning the filming over here, Asa, former fellow employees here at Christie's, and just to say the whole community is really always so welcome, and it's so nice to see everyone's face. So thank you for the prepared remarks. I'm gonna wrap it up. I think everybody probably wants to share more stories with each other and spend a few minutes. It's also the night before APAD, so please, I know everybody is busy and there's a lot going on tomorrow. The auction world also has our previews opening, not only at Christie's, but all around town, starting this weekend. And a few of us are gonna share drinks relatively nearby, so if you don't have plans, you're welcome to stick around, and I'm sure there will be groups kind of heading off. So thank you so much, everyone, and look forward to it.